right, here we go, everybody. And welcome, everybody, to the episode 4 of the Secret Cantina podcast. Today, I've got a couple of different faces with us today. I have Secret Sunny, and he's not on the team, but he is a friend of ours, and we love him to death. His name is Brandon. He's going to go ahead and be joining us today. And I also, as usual, have Secret Andrew here with us. So we're going to talk about the PQ season, we're going to talk about Lille, we're going to talk about the meta, we're going to talk about the world of Star Wars as we know it, and hope you enjoy and have a wonderful time and relax. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the first thing here. As usual, I want to give shout outs to everybody from this weekend. So Brandon in our call here went ahead and got his qualification. He and I went down to North Carolina, we played in a tournament down there. I believe it was it Gamers Guild was the name of the store, I believe was what it was called. Had a great turnout and went ahead and great prizing, wonderful time. Had a wonderful road trip just overall. It was great. And he took it down, got his invite, so I want to have a huge congratulations to him on that. It's really awesome. I also want to give a huge shout out to our European players. There was a huge regional, as everybody knows. Huge shout out to everybody that participated, and not only day 2 got their showcases, but to the top 8. Awesome job, and we'll go a little further into that one here in a moment. And lastly, all the other PQ winners. Like I said, it's the first weekend of PQs. Huge shout out to everybody that was out there, went to your PQ, took it down, and had an awesome job. And if had some firsts, top 8ing, anything like that, if you had an accomplishment that was good for you, huge achievement for you, and congratulations. Hope to build on that for you going forward. So with that, kind of want to talk about something today that's a little bit different. And this plays into part of why I have Brandon here, is I kind of want to talk about up first, before we get into the meta, before we get into Lille and the PQs, I want to talk about coaching and the importance of discussing and your work ethic. So, as many may or may not know, Brandon has been partaking in coaching sessions, and he has been steadily improving. He joined the game, I want to say mid set 3, or was it the beginning of set 3?
I'd say beginning of set 3
okay.
Was a good marker for me.
Okay, perfect. And so he joined beginning of set 3, and he's been steadily improving, trying to find what deck he enjoys, finding out, learning from other players, and it's only been, what? So it came out, I think set 3 came out in December, is that correct? I think around December. So we're 5 months in, so about 6 months, and he gets his PQ in. That's incredible. And so he's gone ahead and gone through coaching and talking to a number of players and play testing and working very hard. And so I kind of want to get his perspective here about how important do you feel coaching was and to your success, and what were like the driving factors that really, drove it home for you to go ahead and get the win this weekend?
Yeah, totally. So first and foremost, to Ryan and the rest of Team Sekrit, thanks for having me on. This is pretty cool to be on the Team Sekrit podcast. Huge fan of you guys and love you to death. So with respect to coaching, I think coming into the game, I think a lot of us like kind of share the idea, when you come into this and it really grabs you and you find something that you love. You want to put the energy that you can into it. And in this area in particular, around the DC area, there is just such a fantastic community of amazing players around here. So, my experience coming into this game was, I go to my local game store with my starter deck, and, I'm playing locals with 2-time PQ champs, right? I'm just meeting all this incredible talent that just absolutely mollywomps me in the beginning of the game, and start making a lot of friends really quick. And I think I took the same approach that many people take, started finding the communities that existed, right? So went in KTOD, right, from YouTube perspective, joined their Discord, the Bothan Network, joined their Discord, started having some engagements with people, started kind of deciding, this Sabine ACL thing might be a fun deck to play. And from there, I did what we all do, right? I went on the unnamed online platform that we all use to play, and just grinded a metric boatload of game ones. And I think what I started realizing over the course of this was, I was teaching myself habits, right? And I was running into some of the same problems. I'd learn a couple of lines that worked, but I would watch other players on stream, and I'd see all these incredible lines that I never really got exposed to, and I always wondered, how do those players get to that level? And I really wanted to start playing this game competitively. So started reaching out to people that I respected in the game, and the good thing about our community right now is it's so small. You can just find these people on Discord and message them and say, hey, do you guys offer coaching? I reached out to Alex Blandon from KTOD. I reached out to Ryan Conroe locally, and I reached out to Ophir Maroom. You guys know him as Woo. Started talking to all these people, and they were all super easy to engage with on coaching. Really got me set up in a quick way. And coming into those sessions, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I wasn't sure if they were going to come in with a lesson plan for me, and day one was going to be how to not get absolutely run over by tricky wrecker ECLs or whatever. And it really wasn't.
I'm just picturing Woo with a chalkboard and
yeah, absolutely.
Professor, just don't do this. Don't.
Yeah, and that was not what it was at all. It was a very individual experience. And I think Andrew can kind of share this sentiment, right? It's hard to point out what coaching gives you specifically, but it really teaches you about yourself and how you play, and certain tendencies and habits that you've developed over time. So, for example, very simple lesson that I learned in coaching that sounds obvious now, but was a really important lesson for me to learn is I made decisions without thinking about the entirety of a turn. Right. So I would look at, hey, this play looks like a really good play to make right now, but I wouldn't really be thinking about what is the consequences of this action. Right. And, other lessons, I've been learning them, all the way throughout this weekend. Right. I think Ryan was giving me some incredible advice on just thinking about the game, and something very, very simple he said to me was, you really need to think about how you're going to win the game, and you really need to think about how you're going to lose the game. And again, sounds obvious, sounds like something you don't need to pay people money to go to coaching for, but when you pair with these people and you start working with them and you start practicing these ideas, you will see huge improvements in play, and you'll start to really notice performance begins to change for you. And I cannot speak highly enough of that. Just getting that experience to have someone else come in, look at your style of play, and really give you some tailored advice on how to change your approach to the game. And of course, this requires you being open to feedback. So a very important thing if you're going to go into coaching. But I can't speak highly enough of it. So going on a rant, but those are some initial thoughts on coaching.
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad to hear that, feedback, I'm not coaching you, but I want to see you succeed. And so when we're at the tournament and I see that you have these opportunities, and I finished my round or I'm watching, I personally am like, okay, how can I go ahead and help you? What is something I noticed? Because it's like, okay, maybe you didn't think about this. And we talked about a number of things, like, did you think about this line that they could have taken? And you're like, no, I didn't. I was like, okay, because this is how you lose the game. Mm-hmm. And when you're from a very dominant winning position. And I think it's as simple as did you think about attacking here when they could have ECL record, or they could do a cunning play for not killing tech, and then they just play a cunning, tap your guys down and kill you, and you have nothing that can answer it because I can see your hand or something of that nature. So I definitely think that that's really good advice. And I know Andrew's gotten some coaching in the past, and I think you worked with Ophir or Woo, and I'm curious, what is your perspective on it? Because you're also a PQ champion, and it seems to be a trend of Ophir's disciples, right? He's two. I imagine he's got others, but as I know, 2 for 2 on the PQ trade for him.
Yeah. So for me, I think part of it was part of it is like we're kind of spoiled, like Brandon mentioned, like in the DMV area, like there's so many good players, so you can get a lot of really good reps just going to locals. Like I've gotten so much out of just like playing with you guys, like just in the last year, like even before we like formed a team. If you're playing against good people, like you just learn a lot. But yeah, aside from that, coaching is just like kind of another angle, I guess, or experience. And for me, like I didn't have a ton of like TCG specific experience. Like I played like strategy games and stuff like that. But the TCG like mechanics and things like that, I wasn't like that experienced with. So I think Woo was really helpful, kind of bringing me up to speed. I think on a lot of things. And then I did coaching with him for like a long time. I think up until like very recently, and that was really helpful. Just like checking in, like before events, after events, like going over really nitty gritty stuff like sideboarding. For me, that's kind of was like a big thing. Like towards the end there, like once you kind of have a feel for the matchups and things like that, like getting into like individual card choices, which sounds like really really tedious, but that's something that we do for like events, and can affect like certain matchups and things like that. And getting different people's perspectives, I think that's the other thing, right? Because it's like when we chat about things, everyone has their own perspective, and just getting additional perspectives. So it's like, like we've done testing with KTOD recently, because they're all really talented players and they see the game a little differently than we do. So it's kind of, in my mind, they're all kind of like the same thing to help you improve. It's just how you want to like go about it. But yeah, coaching definitely was really helpful for me, I think, to bring up to speed on a lot of things.
Awesome. Sonny, I don't know if you've ever had any coaching experience, whether giving or receiving. But what do you think about, the average person asking for assistance? What do you think? Because it can be a lot, right? Like you see these people on YouTube, and you're like, how am I going to go ahead and ask this person to coach me? Like they've got to have a busy schedule. They're in our small world of Star Wars, they're like internet famous in a way. So it's like, how do you approach these people?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it because a lot of people reach out to me as well for this. And then in previous TCGs I played, I have both done it myself, where I've reached out to others asking how do you approach the current meta game, and then I've also done the same for others, right? When they've asked me. So I think it's a great thing to engage in, both sides, right? Being the coacher, being the coachee, and I think both sides actually get a lot out of it too, because if you're a coach taking on a lot of different mentees, right, you'll get some perspectives from their mindsets coming in that can add to your overall total perspective on the game. So I think it's a good thing, and then a lot of people should take it up and engage in it. And congrats to both of you that have had incredible success. More recently, Brandon. That's a huge,
newly minted Brandon.
Huge,
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely.
I just want to piggyback real quick off what Sonny just said. I think that's a really good point. Since January, like when I got my BQ win the week after Sonny did, a lot of people have reached out to me as well with, ask me questions and stuff. And it's really interesting because it's like, as soon as, someone asks you for help, like, it's almost like you have to think about it like harder because you're like, I don't want to give this person like bad advice. So you're like, okay, I have to like break it down and like, you want to explain it in a way that like makes sense and can be, usable to them. So it almost makes you like be like, all right, well, I do this, but how do I like break it down and like make it something that's easily digestible for somebody else that maybe has a different play style or a different perspective or whatever. So yeah, that is very helpful, I think, as well.
Yeah, and one more comment I'll make is I think that it's a good way to make a connection that's long standing in the game, right? I know you mentioned your connection with Ophir, Andrew, and I know that's developed pretty well, right? At Lille, I played against a player that also does coaching with a member of Team Enigma, and that member of Team Enigma is Dylan from Enigma, and this is a cool story too because last year around May, Dylan reached out to me about Palpatine. when I was winning store showdowns with Palpatine, and then I kind of helped him how to do well with that deck. And he's gone on to have a lot of success in Europe with different decks, and is a member of that Dorks team, Team Enigma. And in Lille, there's a player that I played from Germany who is a coachee of Dylan's now, and he was X1 all the way through the tournament until he ran into me. But even past running into me, he went on to continue to win out the rest of the day, right? And this is a player that he was there trying to get as many reps and game experience as he could. And I could really tell that he was benefiting not only from the coaching, but just a big tournament experience like the one in Lille. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do definitely think that, everybody's going to have a different teaching style, and everybody's going to take information or process information differently. And part of my background, I eventually went to college to be a teacher. And it was originally special ed, and then elementary, and then eventually high school education. And I eventually decided to go into IT, but that's a whole different thing. But working in the classroom, teaching kids, and learning that everybody learns very differently is something I found like really valuable through my professional life, because even as my current profession, I still mentor people and I still go ahead and teach them. And through card games, Michael and I have known each other for almost 15 years now, and we've gone ahead and we've lived together. We've known each other for so long that we've had a number of these discussions in terms of game theory or card discussions, from Magic to Flesh and Blood to One Piece, just Yu-Gi-Oh, just a random array of card games through our years of being friends, and always talking about different ideas or talking about different like just game theory in general. It's really interesting to go ahead and get somebody else's perspective, because just because you got coaching from one person doesn't mean coaching from another person is going to be better or worse. It's just a different perspective. And I do think it's like incredibly valuable. So if there are people out there that are wanting to get better, and you just you start spinning your wheels and you don't know, just ask for help. Ask people. Not everybody charges money. I know at locals, people ask me for stuff all the time, and I'll walk through lines. Like before the Richmond sector, there were people asking me about, what do you think about card choices for this deck? And what do you think about these play lines? How do I go ahead and play against this? And I was like, okay, well, let's walk through the line of why you should or shouldn't do this. And so you talk about like common play lines. You talk about common ideas, like and Brandon alluded to it. How are you winning the game? How are you losing this game? What is your direction, your goal? Like, these are questions that when you're playing the game, they sound like, oh, of course, like, how am I going to win the game? Like, yeah, but how you win the game changes all the time, because there is this innate sense of variance that you're getting in these card games, from the cards you draw to the cards you resource to what your opponent has and how you have to react to what they're doing. So how you win the game can change very, like, depending on what's going on. So sometimes you didn't have a chance to win the game. There was nothing you could have done because they just had every potential answer. And Sonny and I have gone through this with like play lines. We've talked through, it didn't matter what we did as a player, I couldn't win this game. By the virtue of what I saw, I couldn't win this game. And that happens sometimes. But other times it's like you resourced a card you shouldn't have that you needed in the late game, or maybe you attacked too early with one unit and you should have like attacked with this other unit or something. There's always something. I don't say always, but there are a lot of times there's something you could have done. So saying, oh, I just didn't draw the cards, it's like, well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. You really have to like look at everything that went on, and it can sometimes be hard to review a game objectively. So if you have difficulty reviewing things objectively, I think talking through with other people is incredibly beneficial. We do it a lot in our team discussion, especially when we're prepping for Beatle, or even when the PQ in West Virginia that Andrew won. We were in Discord and I swapped right over to Han Green. I had in 3 days played that deck. And we were just all three of us in Discord just jamming out games and talking through play lines, discussing the whys of what we're doing. So just having somebody sit there and it's like, okay, why are you doing this? And yeah, it sounds like you're ganging up on somebody when you do like a 2v1, but you're talking about the whys, and it's really beneficial. So I think that if you're looking for help, seeking out coaching is definitely helpful, and just talking with people. There's so many open forums where KTOD, you can, in those forums, there's so many people talking about the game, talking about the decks, choices, all that. And some of it, you will have to weed through some of the bad information, because there's always some information that's good, some that's bad. But just like understanding perspectives, I think is really huge. So
Yeah.
that's a long.
And one thing
I'm
I'd
sorry.
say about this game in particular, there's a lot of TCGs that they have various elements that you can retro. I feel like this Star Wars Unlimited game has a lot that you can analyze after the fact. It being not just a game where you play at a full turn and then an opponent plays out a full turn, action-based sequencing, you can retro a lot. The mana system, a lot of games, Magic has it, a lot of games do not, right? So resourcing decisions are something that you can retro, and then something that's probably common to every TCG is meta analysis, right? Of individual card choices that you take to a tournament, interactions that you might have not expected that came up in a game that now you need to play around, or you could have played around previously, right? All of those things you can retro in this game. So that analysis will really help. And doing it with a coach, having more than one set of eyes on it, helps a lot too.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I was going to jump in with. So like, from a newer player's perspective, right? Like, it can sound kind of daunting, I think, to like just be like, oh, let me go through my games and just try to reassess, like, was I or was I not effective turn by turn, right? So especially when you're new, it is really useful to look at like a recorded game from a completely fresh set of eyes, and just have them say, oh, okay, maybe this turn I think I do this and this with this hand, right? And maybe it was what you did, maybe it wasn't. But it's good to get that perspective, right? And over time, I really just cannot overemphasize the importance of being able to, like, record your games if able, if you're playing online, or like if you're with friends in person, just recreating board states that maybe you had in the middle of a game that you thought was particularly important, and just talking that out, right? Playing open-handed games with your friends to get that perspective is really, really important, because jamming game ones is going to force you, like, it's going to make you build habits that you're organically building yourself. Those may or may not be correct, right? And I think getting that additional perspective to make you think, like, oh, hey, maybe this was a cooler line. Like a good example at BQ from this past weekend, a lesson that I learned, top 8 against a Sabine. I was a little aggressive as Kira Data Vault in finishing the game, and it worked out. I didn't lose, but I missed a lethal strike from my opponent, basically, right? Like I had an opportunity to play a Vigilance to save me from lethal damage, because I thought I was good, right? Like I thought there was no way he could deal the damage that he needed to do to finish me off. But then looking at the game after with Ryan, we were like, oh, whoopsie poopsie, right? That's and that's like stuck with me. So having the ability to look back at games is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the meta analysis, I think, is a big portion. Being able to distinguish, what's happening in the meta, understanding what is popular, what's not popular, where you need to focus your time, where you don't, and to play off or to add on to your point about playing, best of ones versus best of threes. You at most play 50% of your games in a matchup at best of one, and at most you're going to play 66% at game twos, right? Like, if you lose game one, then you have to play the game in game 2 and 3 with the sideboard. And so those only getting reps without your sideboard and not understanding what cards are coming in, what cards are coming out, what is good in certain matchups, what's bad in certain matchups, and understanding what's going to happen in these games is really important. And this kind of plays into something we'll talk about a little bit later. But when you take that extra time because you're like, I don't know what to sideboard, I'm like unsure about what's good, what's bad. When you don't come into a tournament with a plan, your that sideboarding time takes time. And if you're playing a slow deck, like a lot of people are going to switch over to Kira. That's just going to happen. Those matchups, if you don't understand, yeah, sure. If you're playing the mirror though, or you're playing Boss Blue, those matchups notoriously go to time for a lot of people. And if you don't understand what's happening in the match, or your opponent doesn't, and then you spend extra time sideboarding because you didn't game plan for this type of deck, like that's just extra time you're losing when you could be playing, and you're kind of a victim of your own draws because one, you weren't prepped for that matchup, and two, you like didn't have a game plan going in, or you didn't understand it. And so I think a lot of draws can be prevented for understanding, because I played the mirror a couple times this weekend, and our games were done in under like 30 minutes. And it's because I knew my stance in the game, what my plan was, what my sideboard plan was, and how I was going to execute. And my opponent, luckily, they had an idea of what was going to happen also on their side. Didn't work out for them, but they at least had like our sideboarding was very quick. Our early turns are super quick, but not much is happening on the early turns. There are going to be points where you have a lot of decisions, but you need to get those early turns out of the way, so that way you can take time in the later part of the game for those decisions. So that was my thing I wanted to talk about, was just for newer players. If you're looking to get better and you're struggling, ask for assistance. There's tons of forums. There's 2 people in this channel, 3 really, that are proven to go seek coaching and have coached, as well as like I've even sought it out with Michael, just for our friendship. Go seek it out. Ask for help. People want to talk about the game. People want to help, and it'll make you a better player. So, enough about that. Sonny, I know you're in France still. Let's talk about Lille. That's the big thing everyone wants to hear about. So, how's the event? Like, let's open it there. How was the event?
Yeah, this was a blast, a true blast. I think it was probably my favorite Star Wars event that I've been to. It was the first Star Wars event I can say that felt more than just a tournament. So I went for those that don't know, I had been to every sector as well in the US side, as well as Seattle before this, Gen Con last year, and a number of SCG cons, maybe like 6-7 PQs or 8 PQs, something like that. So out of all of them,
that sounds kind of low, I think, for your PQ count.
Yeah, it might be.
That might have been like in 1 month. That might have been like 7 PQs in a month or something.
Some say it went to 2 PQs in one day.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was 2 PQs in a weekend that I went to in February, I believe. That was back to back. That was crazy. But out of all of those events, I think Lille really stood out. This is the first true big event that is kind of on the scale of some of the top TCGs like Magic, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh, even Lorcana, right? 860 players, I believe, 855, maybe, something like that. And it had a lot of bells and whistles that I did not see in the other events. There was Asmodee reps with the Asmodee store, selling a lot of product. The stream setup was very formal, not just something that maybe is a little bit community driven or requires a lot of input from players and not just the staff. So they had their own dedicated staff, and casters as well. And then there was a lot of popularity in the side events and the prize wall, the ticketing system that they used. It was good at Richmond, but it's felt on another level at Lille. They were firing off draft pods, basically. Not just draft pods, but drafted in premier pods and sealed pods. Immediately as one filled and another one would go. And that was the case for half of day 1 onwards, all the way through day 2. For the full time through day 2 until like 4 or 5 p.m. When
Nice.
The main event finally ended. right? Then there were some designers, so FFG devs that are on the Europe side that were doing signings, and then you could come up to them and play some developer duels. So I saw that at Gen Con and PAX, but I didn't see that at the other sectors that we had. That was really cool. That was really popular. There were huge lines for the that particular experience. People wanted to play the devs. And then there was some cosplay as well, where you could get some pictures taken with those that were wearing like Mandalorian costumes, Trooper, Piet costumes. Those, and there's a photo booth where you could put like a background. You could go with a team or yourself or a set of friends, and then like go into the photo booth, take some pictures, Star Wars theme. So yeah, a lot of extra bells and whistles that added to the event and made it not just feel like a tournament, right? Yeah.
Take some notes on that cosplay, Ryan.
Yeah, the people want to know.
We already talked about Vader. That's happening. I got to go ahead and get all that stuff. That is the cosplay that I'm looking. In case anybody wasn't clear, that's what I'm doing for, or planning on doing for, the Galactic Championships. I just gotta do it.
Oh, well, so one thing I mentioned or didn't mention is Twin Suns is a format that I don't think in the US has taken off seriously. But what I noticed is there were so many people really excited to play Twin Suns in
Oh,
Europe.
really?
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
Especially looking forward to it on day 2. A lot of the players that I played against or sat next to, they were talking about their different Twin Suns deck combinations that they could play, and then they had a big tournament in day 2, as well as a lot of casual play, and then Twin Suns pods for tickets.
Okay, cool.
That was cool.
I know that at Richmond there was there were some Twin Suns pods firing.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure too much of that. I know we have some Twin Suns in our local area. Looks like Doug mentioned it as well. I believe the store in, I think is it Arlington or it's Labyrinth, and I don't know the exact location. I'm further west.
It's in DC.
It's in DC. Okay. They do Twin Suns weekly, and I don't know the exact turnout, but from what I understand, it fires regularly. We have a store out here that also runs it. They actually run. They change every week their event. They'll go like constructed, draft into Twin Suns, and then back. That's Huzzah Hobbies out here in I want to say it's Ashburn.
So that's my local store as well as yours, right? So Huzzah does a switch between Twin Suns, Premier, and Draft, and some one-off events as well. But I am yet to be at one of those Twin Suns events locally. I hope to participate in the future at some of them, though.
Yeah, maybe we'll set up like an event for our local area to do like a kind of like a Twin Suns tournament pod type thing. It'd be pretty fun. I'd have to do a little more research into the format itself, but Commander's very popular in Magic, so it makes sense to me that would be popular in this game too. So, it's something to kind of think about.
One of the funny ideas or one of the standout Twin Suns combinations that I heard from a European player this weekend in Lille was Cassian plus Yoda, because you can draw and then you can trigger Cassian's effects. That's pretty fun.
That's pretty sick. Yeah, there's some. I mean, in Magic, there's always broken things. I can imagine there's going to be some combinations as we get more cards and more sets that are going to make that format a lot of fun. Especially with the number of leaders. I think we're up to what we've had. How many leaders did we get? Was it 16 leaders a set almost? Roughly?
Something like that, 16 or 18.
Yeah, and we're on our 4th set, so there's a huge assortment of leaders to choose from in pair, so it's pretty cool.
I think everything's legal too, right? Because I've seen some people saying they want to try like Boba and Django.
The father-son combo, yeah. That's exactly what everybody needs. Everybody needs that, right?
Bully.
Yeah.
Yeah. 10 out of 10. You play the strongest deck, they're gonna bully you out. 10 out of 10. Twin Suns is amazing. I'm a Gar Saxon Tarkin Twin Suns guy. I love it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
That's a fun combination.
Yeah, that makes sense. Buffs, upgrades. Like, let's go. That's pretty sick. I've also to play more on. I know we're not a huge Twin Suns crowd or anything about that. Something fun to do is when you take the packs, you take two of them, you take the 2 leaders out, you take your base. The base color doesn't matter. You shuffle up your cards. You don't even look at them. You shuffle them up, and then you just play a game. So you only need 2 packs. Each person needs 2 packs. You get your 2 leaders, and then you just play the game. And what's cool is if you play your base, if you like, say one of the rare bases is in there, you play the base and you draw a card. You play it as your new base, and then you draw a card. So right now it's pretty broken because there's Colossus, there's the colorless one. So you can basically like heal for 5, or you can heal like for 4 on your base just by putting in the new base and getting those effects. And there's a lot of fun things you can do. You can do like pack wars where you take your pack, you take out your leader, and you play just the game. Or you take 2 packs, shuffle them together, pick your leader. There's a lot of fun things you can do with the limited format. And really, it was what drove me to the game initially, was the limited format. I heard it was great, and that drove me into it, and I had a lot of fun with it, and then I got into Constructed. And I kind of hope, actually it's not even kind of, I do hope that Worlds would at some point implement a Constructed and limited type of format structure. Yeah. They do this. They used to do this in Magic. I haven't followed the Pro Tour in a long time for them, but they used to go ahead and have either modern or standard for the Constructed. They do like 4 rounds on day 1 or 4 or 5 rounds, and then they would do 3 rounds of Constructed. They would show the draft, talk about the draft, and then it would be for like the new set. And then they would do it in day 2, same thing, but your top 8 would be Constructed all the time. So it's just something interesting. Maybe they'll do it in the future. Who knows? But back to Lille in general, and I'm going to pull this up similar to what we did last week. Is I'm going to pull up the whatchamacallit here, the spreadsheet. Yeah, thank you, brain. I'm going to bring up the spreadsheet here, and I kind of want to talk about the meta because there are some very interesting things that happened in Lille. One of them being, if you did not know, and spoilers, warning, who won Lille. If you don't want to know, probably tune out this section. But please don't tune out. We want your views. Shameless plug. Sabine Datavolt. That was the winner of an 860-person event. I don't think anybody on their bingo card had Sabine Datavolt winning the event, let alone existing. So this is really interesting to me because looking at the deck, the guy went 14-1, so you have to take it for some grain of salt because there were only a handful, if any, that were playing this deck. But he basically went undefeated. He had a very high win percentage in everything, and that deck is quite interesting. The second one that was interesting to me was Josh Yeo-Sarah playing again. Well, I shouldn't say again, but he's playing Ray Datavolt. But not only is he playing Ray Datavolt, but he's playing 62 cards instead of 60. Now, you can't see the faces of all of us, but we're all laughing right now because we all know how ridiculous that sounds in theory. Is like, why are you playing extra cards in your deck when the minimum is the minimum? But it works for him. He does it every event that I've seen. I shouldn't say every event, but just about every event. He's playing more than the minimum. And he does well every time. So everybody in the U.S., I don't think I've seen anybody who's just like, there were jokes about it. There was just like, Alex Blandon was joking. Everybody was joking about, just for the love of Christ, just please play the minimum. But he does it, and he does well. So it's not a knock on him. Clearly something's working. And I don't know if he's just dipping all of Europe because of how good he is, and if there's parts of Europe that are bad, because we know there are good players in Europe. There are very good players, even if they weren't in the top 8. But he just does this every time, and he does well. So it's such an interesting thing. But those were really the 2 interesting standouts to me. But talking about the meta, you were there, Sonny. How did you feel when you looked around? when you were there. How different did it feel from playing in a US meta?
Yeah, it felt a little bit more defined than both Richmond and even Denver. And Denver was the Django uh, pre-suspension meta, which was crazy. So in Denver, even pre-Django suspension, Django was only like 18% of the field, right? And for a deck like Sabine to reach 15% post Django, I didn't quite expect that. I don't think anyone really expected that. Maybe they were thinking maybe 10 to 12% of the field.
Yeah.
But it won Richmond, right? So there was certainly some influence there, as well as I would say for the rest of the top three decks in the spread, which were both Quinlan and Kira. They were the performers in Richmond, and that really showed in Lille. Now, what I was seeing in the rounds that I watched in day one, and then even going into day two, I saw a lot of Sabine mirrors, and then I didn't see a lot of control versus mid range as I expected. Because I kind of had this a little bit of a sentiment that we would see a little more control into a tournament in a big tournament in Europe. There was hype around Boss Blue, Palpatine. Neither of those decks were there in that high quantity. I did play against a Bosk, but going around the tables and then watching the Swiss rounds, it seemed like aggro versus aggro. Then you would see like some Kira mirrors going on, and then aggro versus one of those, right? So
Yeah. So if anybody's curious, what I have pulled up here, this is the competitive SWU competitive hub, and this is the page for the Lille event, and they've got the streams and everything if you want to rewatch them if you haven't. And they also highlight the top 8 decks. And then this is a spreadsheet from that I got from that as well. That has all of the information if you're wanting to look at it while we are.
And then the other thing that I do want to shout out, right? All of what we mentioned earlier with Yahasera and then the winner Jonas, right? They were both playing Data Vault. I saw a lot of Data Vault. That was the big takeaway.
Yeah.
So bulk of it was Kira, but even some other teammates of the winner. They were all Scandinavian players, and majority of them were on Data Vault. Whether or not they were on Sabine, they were playing a different leader with Data Vault. So even one of their friends was playing a Han 1 with Data Vault, right? And Data Vault really overperformed in this tournament. And I think even in the PQs this weekend, those it was mostly Kira. I know Pasquale he won one with a deck similar to Yahasera's, but Data Vault's the big winner for sure.
Yeah, that Data Vault is a very interesting deck because it is really just taking everything by storm, right? It has absolutely just. I mean, for the decks that can go ahead and play more of the cards that they're already trimming, it basically just goes ahead and lets you play more, right? Like you just get to play more copies of everything in your deck, and it's quite interesting. The decks that are taking advantage of it, and I'm going to pull up the Sabine list here because I think this is a good indicator of one of these lists that's just doing the same thing and just adding more of it. I don't want to go ahead and talk too much about the very specifics of this list because if you're curious about it, Wu did a video, he released it today, where he does go down the top 8 lists. But I just kind of wanted to look at this one, and just as an example, this and Kira are the two of the ones that really do it, because Kira is just blue-green good stuff. That's basically what that deck is. And this deck is
like wild.
Yeah, this deck is kind of doing the same thing. it's red-green cards. There are some very notable cards that are not in here that you normally see in Sabine lists. One of them specifically is Fleet Lieutenant. That's just not in this list. And it makes sense because the entire deck is in a Rebels deck. But it was very interesting. It's not anywhere in here. Another card is they're playing Radis, but there's 0 Ewing reinforcements. That's a really interesting choice to play one over the other.
Ewing reinforcements, and then also
No resistance.
they have, they have 6, I guess, resistance, right? Or am I?
Do they?
They have
2 different flows, right? Or do they only have
Fisk
the
is
one?
not. I think it's Poe and
Frisk is New Republic.
right.
Not.
I think it's just
Oh, they
Poe
do
and
have Poe.
Radis.
Sorry, you're right. I didn't even see the Poe. You're right. So
Is
it's
it
3.
Is it just Poe and Radis?
It's just Poe. Yep.
Yeah, that is all the resistance. I mean, don't get me wrong. Radis is a 8/6 that beats your head in, but it's not what we would go ahead and assume as the most aggressive card. And Ryan made a good point here. It's a you're not playing Fleet Lieutenant, but you're playing Rebel Assault. And to me, that's a very interesting choice, right? You're choosing Rebel Assault when you have plenty of space. You have 18 space units in this deck. You could play Tandem Assault, right? Like,
yeah,
that does the same thing, but it only requires space and ground. Maybe you just aren't doing that. I don't know. There's a lot of really interesting choices in this deck, and obviously it worked out for him. He went 14-1 in the event, or 14-1-1, sorry, and won the whole thing. So he did something right, and it's just a really interesting thing. This deck was very interesting.
So one of my big takeaways with this deck's performance is Sabine ECL, right? ECL has always been kind of the deemed the most important card in that deck because you had 6 targets that were just insane between Wrecker and Poe, and then even some of the early units were good previously, but we got Sabine's Masterpiece, which is amazing now. But maybe what we realized from Richmond, and then even this, is a card like Timely Intervention may be able to cover that base for that ambush kind of niche for you, right? Yeah. Even paying the 1 extra resource.
Yeah, I mean, in the mirror, the 8 points is a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah,
well, if
you
the
get
game's
8 more
going
life,
longer too,
and then you have to spend 1 or 2 more for a few more instances of an ambush.
Yeah, because if the game's going longer, you can Wrecker for 8 with Timely, right? But if you have 4 or 5 more rounds in the game, so that is very interesting.
Well, something else about that is when you think of there's a famous Magic article called "Who's the Beatdown," and when you think about your role in that matchup, in the Sabine role before, it was kind of when you played the mirror, you were like, oh, this is kind of awkward. Like I didn't win the draw, or I didn't win the initiative, so now I have to play in a very weird way to seize control of the game because I'm not necessarily the aggressor, and sometimes you have to burn your ECL early just to gain that advantage, especially if you get it really, just to kind of hold the game to an advantageous point for you. Something that's interesting in this deck is it almost reminds me a lot, or it does remind me a lot of the Sabine Han Yellow matchup from last season, in which oftentimes the Sabine deck wasn't the aggressor in that matchup. It was actually the control deck, because Han was just as fast, if not faster, because of Cunning existing, and they also played a bunch of 3/5, so they could trade in and kill and bounce things and in just a much better fashion. So as a Sabine player, you had to really rely on controlling the board in fashion in the way you could. This reminds me of that, in that you get to be, in quote unquote, the Data Vault version gets to be the aggressor in every point because you just have 8 more life. And so you get to dictate the pace of the game whether you have initiative or not. And that's really interesting in my mind.
Yeah, that's a good point. The extra life gap allows you to play even more aggressively. Yeah, you don't have to be worrying of them overtaking you. Nearly as early, at least. Right.
Totally. I think just one thing to consider, and obviously it worked out amazing for Jonas in the tournament here. When you're looking at Data Vault, especially when you're looking at Data Vault post board, understand the difference between having a draw engine and not having a draw engine for consistency's sake, right? So, like, I don't know if Jonas had unique tools to help him kind of cycle this deck. Like, I think we saw Mon Mothma as a popular choice for Raid Data Vault. Certainly in Kira, we have Pershing to help us get through the deck a little quicker. And I really think that is super useful. So like when I look at Kira Data Vault, and I'm staring at 60 cards that are all like pretty fire. I'm loving me some Data Vault right now, right? But I think if you're just kind of looking at the field and saying, wow, Data Vault just might be the best green, the best base in the game. I'm just going to build around Data Vault. Just think about that draw engine and that consistency, and what you're kind of giving up with adding those cards. And I think when you looked at the PQ yesterday in Connecticut, the finals, you saw 2 Data Vaults go into game 2, and I think game 1 ended with like a mill out. So they did this thing where both of them threw in basically their entire sideboard into their main deck. So they went to 70 cards. I think that really kind of impacted the Kira's second game, so Jay's second game, because he was kind of struggling, I think, to get through his deck at that point, and I think I saw him side out a couple of cards for game 3.
Yeah, yeah. What I would say for that situation, you really need to have a game plan going into it.
Yeah.
And not just jam the 10 cards, because you got to make sure that your ratios are right. So you may want to jam more than you bring out, for sure, but definitely decide beforehand if you're going to run into like a boss blue or another control matchup mirror. What ratios would you like to see of certain cards in that, and then make that decision.
I definitely agree with that, and that's part of like the puzzle for Data Vault, right? Is can I draw the cards I need to, right? Because you're making the odds of having certain cards by certain times lower innately, and having like filtering to get there. Smuggles, pseudo filtering, you're kind of like you're replacing cards, but you're going through it in a different way. But this type of deck, and I think the difference between this and like a deck like Kira is Kira requires the draw power because it needs to get to those cards in that situation. This deck feels like everything is the same thing, right? It has a game plan that it's going to be aggressive, and everything follows that game plan. As long as your numbers are in line with that, like if you look at like a 50 card deck, you're like, I need X number of 2 drops or turn 1 plays, and you're like, okay, as long as I meet that same criteria or that statistical average to have it in a 60 card deck, then I think you're fine. And the same thing with your 3s, your 4s, and your 5s on curves, right? And if everything stays at those relatively consistent numbers and ratios and everything you have there, then you're perfectly fine. It's when you can't stay at those numbers, or your deck doesn't. If you're playing like a control deck, like Kira tries to 1-for-1 you a lot of times and then catches back up with Barrage and a Flip Barrage or a Super Laser Blast, right? And in decks like that, there's a point where Kira needs to keep resourcing and an aggressive deck needs to stop resourcing. And that's long before Kira's does. So you're essentially drawing 2 cards and Kira's drawing 1. And over several turns, if you don't have any draw power to stake in contention with that, they're going to bury you. Not because the deck is doing something that fundamentally better or different. It's just the way that it's playing the game, it stops resourcing long before you. And the way that the overall Star Wars is limited or is set up, you draw 2 cards a turn. Well, if you're not resourcing, then you're just drawing 2. You're netting 2 cards. You're not netting 1. So I think that's a big thing that somebody, when they're deck building for this, has to consider is what is your deck trying to do, and is it doing everything consistently along the way? And I think that this deck is doing that.
And that's a good semi segue into discussing Yaho's deck,
Yeah.
Sarah's deck.
So pull that up here.
So while his deck is above 62 cards, he consistently does a lot of ratio analysis,
Sure.
right? On all of his builds. So if you were look at his Metafy articles, whenever he's talking about a 51, 52, 54 card deck, he's justifying it with percentages of what he wants to see certain cards at, right? And I'm sure he has the same for this Ray Data Vault build.
Sure. No, and I definitely agree with that, because when he was playing Boba 54, the idea was you want to ramp every time, but you also wanted, there were cards that you wanted in the deck that he couldn't find, that he didn't want to cut. And so as long as he met a threshold for what he wanted for, let's say, resupply, as long as he met that threshold for the statistical average, he was fine adding more cards, and it didn't feel like a downside. That's not to say that you should play more or that you shouldn't. That's what he was comfortable doing, and that it was a calculated analysis of choices. And I think that if you do that, that's perfectly fine. Like, obviously, it's had success for him, and I imagine there's some number of people in the world that do that differently. It is a different opinion. I do believe that is a Yu-Gi-Oh mentality, because that's the place I've seen it most commonly is in Yu-Gi-Oh. They play more than the minimum, but in other card games, it's always the minimum. You play the minimum number of cards to do things, and you just cut the cards. You trim and you cut, and that's it's a different mindset. And I do believe he has some Yu-Gi-Oh background, so it is very interesting.
Yeah, and I played Yu-Gi-Oh for quite some time as well and judged it. And there was a point at which, at that time when I was playing and judging it, that it did have that mentality, but it quickly went the other way. So if you know a card called Upstart Goblin, right?
Sure.
When a lot of people were playing, like they felt like they were playing 37, and then a famous Yu-Gi-Oh player started that trend of having the minimum cards always, right? I don't know about Yu-Gi-Oh in some of the recent years, but
they still do it from time to time. They still go. There's some strategies that go over the 40 card limit.
Makes sense. Yeah, one thing that I think kind of justifies it a little bit in this game. I don't know if it's in every case, but the way that you draw out cards and resource turn by turn. So like draw 2, resource 1. It's you're usually seeing more cards through the script of a game, just by drawing than in other games, in other TCGs. I think in other TCGs, like you may have to use like draw effects on your turn as well to do that, and then tutors and search effects. But in this game, like you're just drawing, you're hard drawing through your deck more commonly than the other TCGs.
Sure, and I know that some players choose not to play. Like, one example is Andrew here. Andrew prefers to play Kira ECL. That is not the norm, or I don't want to say it's not the norm, but that certainly doesn't seem like that is what everybody's doing. And it is interesting that your choice is to, I don't want to say it's interesting your choice. We've talked about your choice to play it and fits the way you want to play. And I think that that's a huge thing is, and you can talk to this more, Andrew, about how you want to play the game versus how the majority of people are playing the game. And I think that they can both coexist.
Yeah. Excuse me. So I actually did take, well, this wasn't Data Vault, but last set, I did take Kira 30 to an event at the start of set 3, or not the start of set 3, the start of set 3 PQ season. So beginning of this year in January. I did take that to the Curio PQ, and it was fine, but I just didn't. I didn't like it. I don't know. There's just a bunch of little things. Like I just felt like sequencing barrage was like really hard if you're basically relying on like your leader to overrun barrage off of. And you know, like a lot of times, like your opponent's prepared to deal with her, and you're kind of overly reliant on cards like Traitorous and things like that. And they're just very like situational, and it feels a lot different than playing, you know, more mid-range units, which I just kind of prefer. And yeah, so I also I think part of it was not having the reps. Like, I have way more reps on ECL than non-ECL, so that's definitely part of it. But part of it also was like just felt like I was like going against the grain. I don't know. Like it just didn't feel as like fun. And for me, like that's definitely a factor. Like in this game, it's like you want to play something competitive, but like I want to have fun doing it, right?
Sure.
So, and in my mind, like I played with Data Vault. It just feels to me very similar to the 30 play style, which is a little bit more reactive. Like you're kind of playing like almost like Boss Blue for like the early stages of the game, kind of.
Sure.
And then you kind of and then the late game's obviously like almost identical, right? You're
Yep.
playing all the same sevens and Star Destroyers and all that stuff. That's identical, but because like the first half of the game is so different, that changes like the tempo and everything. So it is funny, and it's like you look at the card choices, you're like, oh, this is like the same deck,
Right.
minus like whatever 10, 15 cards or something. But to me, it just I don't know, it plays a lot differently. So, and I think obviously Data Vault's super popular and people are enjoying it, and that's great. But I don't know. I think I'm probably gonna stick with ECL.
Sure.
For sure.
I know
Might be one of
Brandon.
the few now. It's so hyped for Data Vault, but
Well, I mean that life
I
plays a
hope
factor.
some others will also start thinking in
Yeah.
Spellwork here.
Yeah, I will say, finals game 3 of my PQ, my opponent did get me to 32 damage on base. So
There you go.
That was a
Data Vault
that's
wild.
good.
forever goated for me, certainly. But yeah, I think to the point of difference in play style. I think the way you build Cura Data Vault kind of affects your early game plays. Like, I don't always feel like I'm like leaning into like, nothing but removal spells until I get to Evader. Sometimes, I'm looking for like the goated, Pershing into ramp into whatever, like, ECL would be sometimes on the flip. I'm still setting up for those same, like get the gunship online. I don't get to ECL. I know some people are doing timely, which is awesome. But for me, it feels like I'm just kind of like building board, just trying to keep things somewhat stable until I get into the bigger plays. And game plan's different for every matchup. But I really like that opportunity to kind of like stabilize until I get to a late game and really kind of take control. At that point, and I've been watching Andrew play, just absolutely crushing it with ECL, and I think he is like goated, one of the best in the business at doing that. I think totally get the perspective of why people are leaning into Data Vault as well, because all the cards are amazing, and you can throw 60. I'm not going to call them broken because I don't want no ban. You know what I'm saying? But
they're no force throw.
Force throw bad card. Yeah. So I think Data Vault's amazing, and the extra health really makes a difference. With respect to getting put in check, the actions that I can take late game, and really just gives me that extra turn to set up a finish, and it made a huge difference for me, and it's part of why I get to call myself a PQ champ now. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, your deck too. I was going to add that your deck, one of the best, or one of the most unique cards, I guess, in like villain blue is Super Laser Blast, right? In the sense that like it does something that the removal is like very, very, very specific in this game for the most part. Super Laser Blast is the only card that can like save you from losing a game that like you otherwise would have no business coming back into, right? Like taking out 2 units, taking out a leader, like an Anakin with a lightsaber and something else or whatever. And your Data Vault leverages that like much better than ECL, because like I'm trying to play a bunch of units, and like you're probably committing less units to the board, so like your expected value for your Super Laser Blast is a lot higher than mine in ECL. And I also want to end the game a little bit faster. So yeah, you can take a lot better advantage of Super Laser Blast and like going into Walkers and Avengers and Star Destroyers and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%. And something else that was brought up by the two of you and discussed, and I actually talked to Josh Everly about this. He's another guy on our team, because before going into sectors, he was trying to figure out what to play. Sonny's been advertising Han Green. Michael thinks Quinlan sucks, but still goes 23-3-3, so I don't actually know if that's true. Sabine still is always going to exist in a post Django world. It's kind of like going into Richmond, it was a fairly open. Nobody really had like anything nailed down to what was there, and that for the most part is still the same. There's a lot of very viable options you can play, and he was trying to figure out what to play. And I was just kind of like, I feel like this format in the game where it's at right now, there's nothing that's doing something so overly broken that you can't just play a deck you're comfortable with. And if you have a lot of comfortable reps into an obscure deck, that can benefit you in a lot of ways. We saw one of the guys locally for us goes ahead and plays Kylo Red all the time. Kylo's his favorite leader. Plays it all the time. Day twos, I think he goes 2-2. I think he 2-2 on day two. Very successful for him. Yeah.
Shout out to Lucas.
Shout out to Lucas on that. That's a huge thing, right? Like being comfortable in what you're doing matters a lot. And there are some people that can play whatever they want and they can just switch from A to B to C, and that's perfectly fine. But when you're going into a big event, a lot of times playing something you're comfortable and you've been playing for a while gives you confidence. I know what I'm doing in this matchup. I know what my goal is. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier in the beginning of the show, talking about your game plan, your sideboarding plan. You have talked a lot about Kira. You developed sideboard plans. We've talked about the sideboard plans. I've even talked to you about how does this matchup normally play, like Vader Yellow. That's a rough matchup for Kira that we're experiencing. So it's like, okay, what's our plan to this? If we see this in the future, if this becomes popular, how are we going to adapt to this as Kira players? Yeah. And so, thinking ahead, it's not super popular right now, but there's a real world where that deck can just take off. It can just be very powerful and do a lot of damage. And if you run into it, you need to have a game plan. Like, okay, I know that this is a problem. And Brandon and I talked about it. Like, I played it in round 4, and I lost a really close match, 2-1. We talked before top 8 and was like, I think you have a game into everything in here. This is the deck that I think is going to be the one that's real. Outside of Sabine, we all know what Sabine does. Sabine does Sabine things. But this deck is we need to talk about this. What's the game plan going into this? We talked about sideboarding. I didn't really have a plan for sideboarding it, and so after that I was maybe top target, and top target ended up sealing the deal. It saved it. He went to 32, but he had to heal off a top target earlier in the game. So it's we talked about how do we sideboard this? Our sideboard didn't really have much for that. So it's what are we doing here? So that's where collaborating, discussing, and even at tournaments discussing certain things. But this being comfortable with what you're playing, I think, is more important than just playing the best deck. And another example of this, in Connecticut, Tarkin Blue top 8'd Connecticut.
Yep.
That we see it, yeah, we see Tarkin Blue every now and then. We have a Tarkin, Brian plays Tarkin Blue, loves Tarkin Blue, does fairly well with it. Jason Seabury from Connecticut was the guy that came down here to Washington D.C., played Tarkin, beat all our faces in with it. We were like, what is this deck? What is going on with this? And I think he was top 16. And I don't know that he played Tarkin Blue again, but there was the Tarkin Blue player there. So it's he's comfortable. Yeah. He knows his matchups. That says a lot.
That Tarkin Blue player had been playing Tarkin Blue for a long time and also topped the last PQ set that was in that area too with it. And it wasn't Jason. But both of them have been playing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I think Lucas chimed in the chat. So he's watching.
Oh, okay, he in there?
Cool. Did he? Awesome. Dude, Kylo's all right. Dude, Kylo, you're goated with Kylo, man. Shout out to you. Definitely. So,
and also shout out to Barry. Barry's a player that just joined this game.
Very nice.
I have known him from a previous game, and we used to run a podcast from similar to this actually from a previous game I played, the Dragon Ball Z TCG, and then in that podcast, Barry was a regular guest, and he would join in and call in and discuss with us. So it's
Sick.
great to have you here too.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. And, going further, we want the community engagement. The whole point of this is to talk to you as the audience. We want to engage with you. So please feel free to drop messages in. We all have the chat open, talking, to see what you're saying and, just talk to you. We're not going to have you on here necessarily. Maybe in the future, we can discuss that, but we can talk to you via the chat. So I really, really enjoy chatting and discussing different things. Something else that I kind of want to talk about, and this is kind of getting away from Lille. Actually, before we do that, is there anything else you want to talk about Lille and the PQ meta or anything like that before we move into something else?
So I'll address one thing that was kind of a standout, right? Or less of a standout, right? And that's Han. Because Han was only played at 2% in Lille.
Set 1 Han.
And set 1 Han being. Yeah. And okay, we can also mention the set 2 Han. Because set 2 Han had 2 very good players take runs with it all the way to day 2 and very close to the top cut and Sip and Betten. But I wanted to highlight set 1 Han because we saw it in only like 2.5% of the field. The Han Green specifically, and then maybe a little bit more between Han Green and Han Yellow. But that was a surprise not only to players outside watching, but even in the room. So in the room, until those stats went out, and they went out pretty late, like maybe like 6th, 7th round of Swiss on day 1. Everyone was thinking that there's a lot of Han. And then they see the stats and they're like, what? The boogeyman isn't there? So it was really interesting. And I feel that a lot of decks in Lille were warped to beat Han. And it just didn't even show up. Maybe they chose to play a deck that was built to beat Han, but didn't actually show up with Han. And in the PQs of this weekend, I saw a little bit of that, but a little bit more Han. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see going forward what will pan up with that specific leader.
So when we looked at the conversion rates for Spartan Rebellion Han into day 2, it was still quite good.
I'll pull that up while you're talking.
Since you're the Han expert, Sonny, what is your take on that?
Yeah, my take is it's still converted pretty well. I think it had a double conversion rate of its nearly double of what its percentage in the field was, right?
Yeah.
So it is still a good deck and has a place in the meta. I heard during the PQ stream of Connecticut, Tyler, who was also playing Han Green and did very well, made top cut with the 2nd seed with it, did a mid-round interview, and he described it really well. Han Green is probably the deck with the highest ceiling in the meta, but it's also a deck that, if people play a lot of answers, will not win a tournament. As soon as that deck runs into like a matchup where their opponent sees the answers. That happened to me in Lille, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it happened to him right after he described that scenario in Top Cut. It happened to him. So
yeah, I definitely agree with that. With what you're saying,
it's a high ceiling, low floor deck. Actually, I mean, like it's not it's not like the lowest floor deck, but if people respond with Eager Escort or Open Fire on your turn 1 play, or even like Power of the Dark Side, sometimes you can feel like you're playing from behind from that point itself. Right. And that gives it a lower floor than a lot of these decks like Kiradadabal.
It's interesting because if you said like, going into Richmond and Lille, that the Sabine meta share was so high that we would have said, there's going to be a lot of Han because, Han can just outrace Sabine in its current configuration. But yeah, it's not panning out exactly the way that we thought, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah. Well, one of the things
that interaction that people are describing in the chat, right? The Chewy plus the space turn 1 it's probably one of the probably if not the highest ceiling interactions in the game right now.
Right.
It's just
And specifically, like, it's very
there.
hard for Sabine to like interact with that at all in a lot of lines, right?
Yes. Yeah, they have lines like Masterpiece, but if they don't have that line, then it'll be tough with them.
So that's something that you and I have gone back and forth over a while. I say probably it was probably before Beatle, in terms of, because you going into Beatle were playing pilots, like you that was your focus, and I don't like that personally. That's not my playstyle, so I'm not. That's just not where I want to be playing Han Green. And the amount that I played, I felt that there's like some bridge between the two that I felt was like where the sweet spot was for that deck. And now we don't have DJ, so that sweet spot's a little different of where it's going to be. It's probably not nearly as effective into like the bad matchups. But the Sabine matchup, you and I both agree, felt really good for Han. Especially when you're not, like, you can try and race them. They adapted to play Sabine's Masterpiece, and I think that now the next level is for us to adapt as, like, if I'm playing Han, that we have to adapt to the next level there. It's like, okay, we know there's going to be open fires, we know there's going to be eager escorts, we know Sabine's Masterpiece, like, these are going to be things, so we can't just go all in on the turn one Han activation into the Falcon. Right. Yeah. So I think that this is like the logical step of where I'm at, and I think that it goes back to the direction of like sort of like this casino deck, where maybe not as casino, but you're like playing more sevens, you're like playing R2s again. I know I've seen people play Data Vault because they're trying to throw more cards in there. There was one in there was a PQ in, I think, the West Coast that was playing a Han Green Data Vault deck that we were looking at, and theirs was kind of interesting because they weren't playing R2. I'm a huge fan of that card, not even just in Han, but just like overall, I really like that card of what it's doing. And it's like one of those cards that against like Sabine, you can just throw a blaster on it and just kill their turn one play, right? And then, or you can, and it can kill 2 units for your R2. It also just makes your ramp plan much more consistent. You get to your sevens, and like you could, the turns that I felt were really strong in that deck were, turn 1 pilot, or turn 1 Falcon, turn 2 pilot, turn 3 resupply, flip Han. And your board was like pilot, and then you get to play another 3. So your hand was like piloted Falcon, Han, and a third 3-cost card. Now that we're not able to do that as frequently, I think that maybe we go back to how we used to play with turn 1 resupply into the 4-drop. Like maybe Poe, right? Throwing out Poe, putting him on a ship, and then you're starting to race the game that way is maybe where we're going. Or maybe we're accelerating into Enfys Nest and Han again. I don't know. Blue Leader really makes that matchup, I think, much more in our favor because of how flexible, especially if you go turn 1 resupply, you can turn 3 kill their Kira with your Blue Leader. I think that that's like probably a much more reasonable path. But it's going to be interesting to see where the adaptation is, and that's where my ideas or my brain is. I don't know if you're different.
The good thing about Han Green is you can adapt in those ways, and you talked about Munster's list, right? That West Coast PQ, second place. There was also the winner of Lille's, his teammate, ran a Data Vault list as well and made day 2 of Lille. And that list was very different than what you described with the ramp and R2, but it was more value Han, and he was playing Radis, just like the winner. But there were a lot. It was like a good stuff's value cards list of Han Green, 60 cards because of Data Vault. So there's a lot of adaptability. And that specific scenario you mentioned, right, going into Sabine, I talked this over with another good Han Green player, and a lot of like what we do is on that Sabine flip turn, we'll also be at 4 resources, and we'll, even if we don't have Blue Leader, we'll kind of bluff Blue Leader by putting down a resource, just go to 5, and then make them think we have Blue Leader, and then sometimes they play a little bit differently. But Blue Leader is kind of key, and it can be used to adapt in those situations that you get ECL Masterpiece a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on that resource turn, if you didn't ramp into it or anything, using your first activation of Han to kind of action churn to putting down the resource, like you said, to bluff it, But even if it's just in your hand, like it's really important to get that fifth resource. That if your first action isn't that, and they flip, and then you then are like, oh, I need to activate Han, put the resource down, and they slap a Darksaber on there. You're basically dead. So going and using that first action as a priority of like, okay, I need to kill this, and you make sure you have it so you can put that resource down to kill it is super important. And you see that actually in when we play Kira, and playing the Kira data vault. These sequences matter a lot, like especially in the Kira Sabine matchup, because you get to 5, and say you ramped into 5, and they're on their 4. There are a lot of situations where players will flip their Kira as soon as they flip the Sabine, and you only put 2 damage on it. Then they slap a Darksaber on there and kill you. And it's like, okay, this is like something that's really important. Another factor is holding your, in specifically the Kira matchup, holding your resupply to resupply on 4 resources to kind of in a sense pseudo action turn where they flip their Sabine, you play a resupply, then they have to think, am I still going through with this Darksaber plan? And then they slap it on there, you flip Kira, kill their Sabine. And you're like, okay, like either you're going to equip it or you're not, and I get the benefit from this. And if they throw a K2, say they're playing ECL, they throw a K2 into your Kira, well, they didn't equip Darksaber, and their Sabine has 3 damage on it. So you can probably do something on your next turn to kill it. And these flips and interactions, and I know we were talking about Han this went into Kira, but I think that they both play very similar, and like the flip turn can matter a lot for against Sabine, and making sure that your deck can adapt to what that deck's doing. And that's actually, I shouldn't say just Sabine, it's a lot of decks. The flip turn, that tempo advantage that you need to play around, you have to have an answer for a lot of them. And that just happens to be one.
Even so, disregarding Sabine, right? It's even in that Kira versus Han matchup.
Sure.
Right? Like, who gets the advantage because of the Kira flipping against Han, or Han versus Kira. Sometimes you put the resource down so that you can blue leader in a similar fashion on Kira, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or Han pilot on Kira. Both of them will hit and one shot the Kira leader, right? So yeah, how you play out that is important in a lot of matchups and scenarios.
I think one thing, especially for new players, right, that I see like underutilized is the power of the soft pass in a lot of these matchups, right? So like, I am a massive Han enjoyer. Predominantly, I've been an aggro player in this game, so I'm used to just do something, like constantly move the state of the game forward in my direction. And coming over to Kira, you start to learn it's really important, on the data vault side at least, to kind of bait out action and figure out what to do, as Ryan was mentioning, right? There's like a critical moment where, if we can get that Darksaber on Sabine and then flip into it, I value trade, and I get exactly what I want out of that Kira action, and I'm totally good going to the next turn. But if I'm too aggressive, I might miss that opportunity. So when you're looking at like the Han matchup, the Kira matchup, etc., really look for those moments to make that, I identify the moments where maybe the soft pass is the right move, where your opponent's clearly waiting for you to do something, right? Take the actions that you can, action churn or soft pass, if you think you can afford it, and if you think your opponent is going to soft pass into you, maybe take advantage of that. On the Han side, throw down a 4-cost Kira, right? Brick the turn. And continue to advance your board state, but definitely think about when you can use that pass.
Yeah, another scenario about the flip turn from a Han perspective, because this Han's flip is really important for a lot of situations that are happening, and a lot of decks need to realize what's going on that turn, to either stop it or manage it in some effective fashion, because. And this is also on the Han side, because if you say you're playing against Kira and you flip Han and you didn't use a resource and you don't have blue leader to kill their Kira, but they flip theirs, it's not necessarily a bad idea to just run your Han into their Kira, depending on what your next turn play is going to be. Because if you have, like, let's say you have a 7 in your hand and you have a second 7 in your hand, and you throw, like, let's just say Ewing reinforcement. I run my Han into your Kira. I can go ahead and next turn, this turn I can then Ewing reinforcement, put units down, and say my next turn play is, let's just say Big Han. I can take one of the cards I draw, put that down, and still play my 7. But if you kill my Han on the next turn before I ever get to attack with it again, then I can't play my 7 and I'm stuck on 6. And a lot of Han decks don't play more than maybe 3 or 4 6s at the very most. And you're running into this weird area where you have to churn out a 4-2, or you have to churn out like a very weird double 3 play, and that's not always great because you can fall very far behind. And so being able to recognize what your plan is there, that those sequences, you trade your leader, yes, that's not like the ideal situation for Han, but your next game plan, if it looks like I'm going to play a big Han to kill whatever their threat is, that can be a huge factor, being able to play it versus just having 2/7 sit in your hand and you can't do anything. So there's a lot of things that can happen on the flip turn for Han and against Han that, like you were mentioning, the ceiling is so high on the decision points of that deck that that's just a small decision that can have a huge impact on the direction of your end game. Because usually when you flip your Han, you're entering the end game, and that's like you need to figure out how you're going to navigate and set up a plan. And Kira is probably the worst matchup for Han right now, and that is you're going to see a lot of it if you're playing Han Green, and you have to have a plan for that matchup, other than just I'm going to play tech. Like honestly, that doesn't do it right now. Like there's so much removal in the format, especially for Kira. You flip tech, she plays Vader. Like you're like, cool. You played a tech, I played a Vader. I killed your tech, and I have a 5/5 that I can put a shield on. Like, was that like fun for you? Like, this is the start of my end game, and your end game's dead. Like, okay.
So
it's
one
really
thing, if you are a Han Green player trying to think about what to do against like a Kira Data Vault, as someone that's been playing Han Green for a bit that just recently switched over to Kira Data Vault, I know a lot of people talk about, okay, against control, you kind of want to side in the home one and the salvage, right? And you want to start your home one Chewy loops late game. Awesome, that's really good. Also think about what you're going to do before those turns, right, to combat Kira. Because if I am cooking your board every other chunk of the game and you're not able to effectively go wide, distribute your Poe, X-Wing, etc., kind of take my power offline. Like, Chewie's great, right? Chewie's a great card, but it's not an unstoppable card, right? And if I get to that, point where I can Vader Death Trooper it or whatever, it's really, I think, going to tilt the game in my favor. So really, as a Han Green player, think through how are you going to play Kira pre-7 resources to establish a good board. Are you prepared for me to traitorous you? Are you going wide enough to put enough pressure on me to force certain interaction? Or are you just giving me the opportunity to control your board? I think that, going into Han over the weekend, any game I didn't have good control over the early game, I felt, really on the back foot. And any game where I just had the good turn 2, 3, 4, I just felt in control the entire time. So
yeah, I mean, Chewy and a Tui is a thing for a reason, right? Like you get those 2 units, one's power proof and the other one is basically removal proof. I mean, it's not completely, but it's extremely powerful. And as a Kira player, and I played both sides of that. I played against Andrew when he won his PQ, and that there were points in that game that it felt extremely helpless on my side, and it just didn't matter what I did. And I'm sure that he's played against games against Sonny where he's felt like there was nothing he could do at certain times. It really is, what is your plan? And we alluded to it at the beginning. What is your plan to win the game, and how do you losing the game? And if you're not developing or constantly asking yourself those questions, I think that you're going to struggle. And so you need to come into matchups and tournaments understanding this is what my deck does. It does it very well. And what are my game plans? And I think that's like the best thing, is being comfortable and having a game plan. And if you don't have a game plan, you're gonna struggle. And I think that that's like super important.
And whatever you do, when you look at Han 2, Shadows Han, just don't switch to it. Me and Andrew, we got a good thing going on right now. we're happy. Just don't consider that one.
Yeah,
stay where you're at. You're on the right track. Just
stay on Han one world.
Yeah.
Keep playing Han one pilots. That's fine.
Yeah.
Keep playing Han one pilots. Let me go ahead and
Yeah.
traitorish your Falcon. Let me attack you with it. Go ahead and go Falcon Chewie. I'll go Pershing Super Laser Tech. I'll traitorish your Falcon. I'll start killing you with it. You're going to question your life decisions, and that's fine. We can keep doing this all day. Please continue to do this on green players.
Yeah, the numbers
seriously,
all three of you guys used to play
the
Han
Shadows
until recently.
Ignore them and consider it. It's a real good deck. Betten and Sip we're onto something for sure.
Yeah, that deck is super interesting. It's aggressive. It is very aggressive. But I think that there's some really interesting things there.
There's so many interesting niche benefits of the cheating out unit early. Like the Poe is one of the big examples, right? But then also like Blue Leader early, like lining up with the Sabine flip, right? That's huge.
Oh yeah,
and something that they didn't
the Blue
run,
Leader,
that
the
they
Blue Leader
could run.
lineup.
Yeah, the Blue Leader line. Yeah, something that they didn't run is Radis, and that's funny because these other decks that did very well, they had little resistance count, but that deck has an insane amount of resistance count, and it still didn't run Radis, so maybe they could.
Something interesting you mentioned. I know Sip and Benton were on 2 green. In Richmond, Paul Heaver was also playing Han 2 green.
I played him.
Yeah.
Day 2.
So
sorry, on day one.
Day one. Yeah, he did day 2. I don't remember exactly where he finished. I think it was top 32 or somewhere close to that. So that's
very similar to what happened to Benton, I think.
Yeah. That's another Han green list. If you're looking at the European Yulil version and also looking at his list, they have enough differences that you should look at both of them. But a lot of the ideas are very in common. If you resupply on 3, I play Cham. I just resupplied with you, and I have a 5/2 on board. That's a really impactful thing against Kira. Going ahead and if you're playing against Sabine, being able to Blue Leader on the turn 4 and kill it. So because you're playing it for 2, you get the 2 to put it on the ground. It attacks for 5. It kills Sabine. So that's a really important thing to consider in these matchups is how are these things lining up? And even looking at the Data Vault deck, right? Like the Ray Data Vault, it's a very interesting deck because it's doing a lot of blue-green heroism things, but it's also just healing a lot. So it has 33 life and then Ray heals for 3, so it's the first attack is effectively 36. And sometimes for Sabine, not all the time, sometimes that can just be too much if you're able to control the board with a lot of the tools that we have now. So I think the meta is in a really good spot. I think that we have a lot of diversity, and I think we're going to see a much more condensed meta when we get into more PQs. My guess is you're going to see a lot more Han, Kira, and Sabine as your top 3, and those are 3 decks you have to be prepared for if you're not going to play them. And that is the condensed. The PQs are going to be a condensed meta, whereas regionals and sectors are going to be a much more broader spectrum of decks. So when you're looking at these decks for the regionals and sectors, you need to consider what they're doing, because I think that because the meta is going to be so much more condensed in a PQ season, you can make more concessions or more focused choices rather than in a sector or regional. I think that's something you need to consider.
And did you purposely leave out Quinlan because Michael's not here?
No, it's Quinlan sucks.
Yeah, we know what Michael would say.
Yeah, I'm leaving it out because I know what he would say. So, no. In all honesty, Quinlan is. I think it's still a viable deck. I think that if you have reps into it, I think it's perfectly fine. I
feel like every event he's up 1% from day 1 to day 2, right? That's still positive. It's not.
I didn't see.
Yeah,
I thought it was
the
roughly the same.
Rate is net positive, but it's not
just barely.
It's not a huge positive conversion rate like some of these other leaders.
Yeah, that means that indicates he's still very solid, right? And you could still win a tournament with it, right? I mean, Michael got to the finals, right? It's a very solid deck that does one broken thing. So I think it's still a decent choice into a wide field.
Right. No, absolutely. And so I think that if there's anything to take away from the overall episode for today, I think that there are some key points. One, we want Minneapolis to be as good, if not better, than Lille. I think we all agree with that. What you put into, what you put into the game, you're going to get out. And I think that asking for help and all that's really good. And play what you're comfortable with. The meta feels wide open. There's good decks, there's bad decks, but if you're comfortable with it and you feel it's got a real legitimate shot, I think you'll have more success than just playing a deck you're not comfortable with. So, but with that, I think unless anybody has anything else, I think we've been doing this, talking for about an hour and a half, a little over that. I know Sonny's got to get to his flight here pretty soon. He's got to fly back to the States. Anybody else got anything else they want to talk about before we head on out?
No new topics, but a quick shout out to all the players that I met in Europe and Lille. A lot of people asked about our team as well, and they talked to me about some of the content that I've done in the past for both Han and Palpatine. A lot of the great players I had time hanging out with them between rounds. Those that were in day 2 and Top Cut, and some other players that I didn't know previously before that are very good in Europe, have won tournaments in Poland and different places in Scandinavia, Germany, those kind of places. So it was great meeting you guys.
Yeah, hopefully we can get more of us out there.
Yeah. There's a possibility of some Vieta-like tournaments in that could come up in Europe, and maybe we could have a secret team over there.
That'd be sick.
That'd be cool.
If you don't mind, I just got one last thing I'd like to say to the folks listening.
Absolutely.
Summary. 6 months ago, I didn't know how to play this card game at all. If I could send a message to like anybody out there that is like working their butt off, hasn't seen the results they want to see yet, always believe in you. Hard work and persistence is going to pay off for you. These tournaments go left and right all the time. You're not always going to see the result that you want, but if you keep working at it and you always believe in yourself, you are going to get the result that you want, and you are going to be a champion. So, again, if I can do it, so can you. Keep working hard, and good luck to you. Looking forward to seeing you in top 8 down the line. Over.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really thank you for coming on the show today. Both Sonny, I know from all the way in the future, thanks for being here. And Brandon, again, huge congratulations to you. And as usual, Andrew, thank you for taking time out of your busy week. So everybody, with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Please like, subscribe, share it with your friends, hit the notification. It really helps us as a team. Tell us what in the comments or in the chat afterwards. I'll have timestamps for all of this. What did you like? What didn't you like? Do you want to hear certain things discussed? Do you want to hear other things? We're working and planning on some giveaways for the channel, so look forward to those coming up here pretty soon. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in with us. We greatly appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and look forward to seeing you at PQs in Minneapolis. Take care, everybody.